Och detta leds av den generalsekreterare Anna Sundström från Olof Palmes internationella center. Samtalet är på engelska.
Welcome everyone to our guests and of course also to all our viewers. And as said, Sweden had a very prominent role in supporting the fight against apartheid in Southern Africa, both from top to bottom. And we had a broad civil society movement engaged. Student movements, youth organizations, solidarity groups, trade unions and women's movements. This solidarity engagement is quite unprecedented ever since. So we're going to talk a little bit about what evoked this very strong feeling of engagement back then and what can we also learn from that to the future. I would want to start with a special warm welcome to you, Lindiwe Mabuza. You were at, well, quite a few years, Sweden's, well, the representative in Sweden from from ANC. And you came to Sweden in 1971, and I've heard, at least, and you must correct me if this is not true, that you were sent off to Sweden by Oliver Tambo, and he said to you something like, "You are going to friends. Sweden stands as a brilliant landmark in the history of our struggle." So maybe you can talk a little bit about how was it to come to Sweden and what made Sweden so special?
Thank you very much, Anna, for the introduction. Let me correct one thing. I came to Sweden, to Scandinavia actually, in 1979, not 71. And I stayed there until 1987. How was it? It was the most amazing experience of my life. We're talking about it with Thomas, that for both of us, it was an incredible period in history, that we were able to take part in such a momentous struggle against a very, very powerful monster, apartheid. And when I arrived, there was so much warmth everywhere I went, and I had to go from country to country to present myself, first of all. And as I went around, I realized that there was a lot of good feeling about the ANC, a lot of anger about what was happening in South Africa. And fortunately, when I left Lusaka, I had a program that I brought to Scandinavia. And it comprised 3 elements. First of all, I was asked to make sure that ANC has offices in all the Scandinavian countries, not just Sweden. And we managed to do that eventually, but it took some time because the first office we opened in Copenhagen in 1985. In 1986, we opened in Oslo. And just before I left, we were making arrangements to open an office of the ANC in Helsinki. So that first mission was accomplished before I left Scandinavia. But also when I came there, I had 2 specific programs that I had to ensure happened. One, the construction of our school in Tanzania, Solomon Mahlangu Freedom College, which we call SOMAFCO. We had to make sure there was money, there were resources to build the entire complex in Tanzania. And there was also the second program that I was to ensure, that was the promotion of an ANC cultural group, Amandla. And this was a song and dance and theater cultural group, about 30 people. We managed all of these things. And it was done because the countries of the Nordic countries had the nobility of the human spirit. I've never been anywhere where from a child, young, crushed children, when you told them about apartheid, their faces would turn red, angry at what they were hearing about the inhumanity of people that were the bosses of apartheid. The people of the whole region gave us so much support in so many different ways. For example, for us to be able to construct the school in Tanzania, I had to move from country to country, but also from school to school, because we found out you had what you call Operation Tagswerk, the Operation One Day's Work done by people's organization. When I told them about our school, they said, we want to build the science block at that school. For me, that was so moving because apartheid had said science and mathematics are not good for Africans or for Black people in general. But here the students were saying, we want the school to have a science block as good as our own science blocks in Sweden. The quality of that thinking, the quality of the involvement of school pupils to raise the money, and they did raise the money for that. We also had to after the school pupils had raised the money for the school for the science block, the teachers approached us. Teachers Association of Sweden said, well, we have this good example from our young people, the students who have built the science block. We would like to do the teachers block for your school. I mean, there was no end to the amount of goodwill and readiness to make sure that that school did thrive.
So Lindiwe, may I ask you, how would you then explain this solidarity that you met from school students to teachers to, well, the Swedish government, political parties, student movements? What do you think is the reason behind Sweden at such an early stage recognized and supported ANC?
Well, I think it's the way the Swedish child was brought up. There's a sense of decency. There's a sense of wrong and right that they grow up knowing. And we were the benefits of that sense, the communal sense you have. Somebody told me recently that you have Jantelagen, the law that really determines your relations with each other. But we were benefits of all of that, the good upbringing of the people of Sweden. But we're going to go into further explaining, because the churches in Sweden played a significant role in that. The moral, the ethical, unethical behavior of the people in South Africa is something that went against the grain. It wasn't decent, it was just immoral. They took that position.
So, Tomas, may I then ask you, Lindiwe talks about, well, the Jantelagen being maybe one reason behind the Swedish engagement, and she also witnessed to the fact that there was such a broad engagement in the Swedish society. You yourself were, well, not maybe a child, but young at this time, and became quite engaged as a artist, and also engaged other artists in Sweden. And you were one of the main organizers of the big ANC-gala in 1985. How do you explain the fact that you became so engaged and also managed to sort of engage your fellow artists?
Well, Anna, I was aware of the situation, of course, in South Africa. But what really started things was this meeting with Lindiwe. I met Lindiwe at a restaurant together with some other Swedish artists, Mikael Wiehe, Björn Afzelius, Don Hylander, P. Beckman, I think, and also the organizer, Tommy Rander. And Lindiwe was really inspiring us. She really made us understand that we could be part of making a change, you know, and also the need for it to raise the awareness of the situation. So I remember after that meeting, actually sitting at the meeting, it just felt very natural, and of course we have to do this. And of course we have to reach out to our colleagues, other Swedish artists, which I must say also was quite easy. Mikael and me and Dan and P, we picked up our phones and called other artists, and I would say almost everyone said yes directly, you know. So it was not very complicated to get the artists together for the concerts in Gothenburg some months later.
And tell us, for those of our viewers that maybe wasn't around in 1985 and do not have memories of the gala, tell us a little bit about the gala itself.
The gala took place in Gothenburg at Scandinavium, and it was in November. I think it was 28th of November in '85. Some 20 artists. Imperiet was a very big rock, and at the time with Joakim Thåström, they were performing Totas Bluesband, Eva Dahlgren, Mikael Rickfors, och de artister jag nämnde tidigare. Hans and the Wolves United var också ett band som var med. Also a band playing. What more artists? Sanne Samuelsson from Denmark.
So most famous Swedish artists at that time, it seems. Many of them at least.
At the time, participated. And it was a concert, 20 artists. I think the show went on for some 3-4 hours. And the first one sold out really fast. So a second concert was added the night after, also sold out. And it was taped for TV, and there was a live album made, and we recorded a single for this special occasion, Berget till för att flyttas, a song that Mikael Wien and I wrote together. And all this, you know, it's sold lots of records, and SVT sent the concert on TV later on, so it had a huge impact, I would say, in Sweden on all levels, for kids and old people. So the awareness of the situation rose quite significantly, I must say.
Sanna, may I then turn to you? You work today at the Olof Palme International Center, also treasuring, you might say, the strong relations between South Africa and Sweden, and not the least the labor movement here in Sweden and the labor movement in South Africa. You yourself was not part of the struggle back then, but would you say that it still affects you and that it has affected you, and how can you see this in the people that you meet today?
Well, I was just a small kid myself when ANC came to power in '94. But despite this fact, I would say that it has affected me a lot personally, but also the work that we do. To me personally, I think that the Swedish support to the struggle in South Africa serves a perfect example of international solidarity. And it helps convincing me the role that international solidarity can have and can play in the world also today. And also that changes that you might think are impossible actually are possible when people go together. And what concerns the work that we do, I would say that the work we do today is to a big extent possible because of what we did back then. Even if there were thousands of Swedes active in the movement and in the solidarity movement back then, Olof Palme as a person became to be a symbol of the broad movement. And working for organization, coming to South Africa with this organization helps a lot, and it still opens doors. Because of what Sweden did back then, Sweden are still seen as a legit and a trustworthy partner, and that we are there because we care and not because of economic or other kind of self-interests. However, I must say that the younger population, the younger generation in South Africa that were not part of the struggle and they were not part of the solidarity movement, they're of course not as aware of the strong ties between South Africa and Sweden. So often when I travel to South Africa, I feel a responsibility of bringing the history up. But also that I think that it helps to create an understanding of why we do what we do today. And then I think it's also important to just mention that we cannot only live on the old merits forever. We also need to be judged by what we do today.
Absolutely, and I think we will come back to that a bit later on in the discussion. But Lindiwe, may I turn back to you and ask you, Sanna says that, well, in the younger generation today, there's not this vivid memory maybe of how the solidarity looked back then. You yourself, of course, is, well, living this kind of solidarity and the remembrance of these days today. How do you also see it in the South African society, and how can we also make sure to remain or uphold the strong relations and remember the solidarity?
Memory is very important to continue the work. We must remember exactly what people did. It's important for us. That's why we decided to do a special book, and Tomas contributed to that book. A book written by people who were involved in that solidarity, to show the kinds of things that South Africans did together with the Swedish people in order to bring down apartheid. And it's amazing the kinds of work that were done clandestinely, not open, but important work, connecting with the labor movement inside the country. When the labor movement itself was very unpopular with the government at the time, to be able to make those inroads into South Africa by people like Magnus Wallen. He was in and out of South Africa, getting information so that the press in Sweden would have the right information. Well, I hope that the book that we're working on is really something that will go into the schools and universities of both South Africa and Sweden, because it's part of an important history, and we live with that history, and we can take it off from there.
I've also put a few books here on the table because apparently this has been a very important and special part of the Swedish international solidarity work, and there's been some documentations already made. We will of course also look forward to the book that the two of you are planning, and maybe we on the next year's book fair can come back to this. To me, what is also so special is also the stories by so many people that I've also met over the years, how they witness to the fact that this struggle has also changed them personally. And I mentioned to you earlier that only yesterday I received an email from Anders Hagström, who is a Swedish technician, sound technician, that was also part of the BOA, sort of a music rock concert that toured also the African continent, and he worked also together with you, Lindiwe. And what was so nice was that he also said that this really had changed him for life. Tomas, do you sort of recognize this? Do you think that this experience also changed your view upon how the world is organized and what we as individuals can also do to change the world?
I think so, very much so. When I think back, for me it was an eye-opener in many ways, working with this. On many levels, also seeing that it's possible to do things together, and when there is an obvious cause that people can find important to do together, you know, you feel that force, and that's a very positive thing to bear with you in the future. And I would say that what we did, all the artists those years, I think it has had quite a big impact on all of us. I think so, absolutely. And of course also politically, to see that, you know, there are you can change. There is possible to make changes, you know. So I would say it influenced me a lot, that experience.
The knowledge of the possibility to change the world is, of course, extremely important and strong in its own right, so to say. But at the same time, it's not always easy. And there were, of course, those who did not want an end to the apartheid regime, and it wasn't easy, the struggle back then. We know, of course, this. But how did this also affect you here in Sweden, Lindiwe? Could you also feel the the ones that did not want you to succeed, did they also follow you here to Sweden? I think there was some kind of an incident with the ANC office here in Sweden, for example.
Yes, there was. But we expected that because in South Africa they were murdering our people. Children were slaughtered. In the frontline states, they were sending their agents to kill our people. So we knew that the arm of apartheid was very long, that it could reach out anywhere. But we didn't think it would go as far as it went with the bombing of our office. I would like to read what my niece, who was inside the office, wrote about it. Can I do that for you?
Of course,
so
please.
So you understand how it impacts on a human being. She says, to enter the office, you had to get to the 4th floor with a lift, or you could walk all the way up the long staircase if you were energetic enough. You first came through a double door, which you had to unlock. And if you worked at the office, you had the key. You could not just arrive and tumble in the office. You were expected so. Like the Chilean guy who would have been expected was inside the office at that time. This double door was metal. I later discovered that it had a cement bag sandwiched between the outside and the inside metal. A heavy door, a struggle to open with double keys. Inside, a few steps led to the next floor with a lighter door. Mohammed, who was the deputy chief rep, and our guest sat in the office directly facing the door leading to the bottom floor when I offered them tea. I went to the boardroom with a big table. It was mainly used for official meetings. They also used it as a utility table when they were preparing for Amandla, cutting cloth or sewing costume. But just as I made the tea, suddenly there was a huge explosion. Stunned, I turned my back, but I couldn't remember what I was doing when I heard what was louder than the sound of thunder. It was a huge explosion. Somewhere in my mind, I assumed that the kettle had exploded because that is the only thing that was connected to electricity which could possibly make that sound. It was just so humongous. Instinctively, I just dived under the boardroom table. I don't know what I was expecting, but in no time, there was a horrible smell of sulfur, a putrid smell. There was smoke all over, all around. I heard Mohammed calling my name from afar, Lindiwe. I could not see. I was choking from the fumes. He came to find me, and they pulled me out. And we went to his little office, which had a small window. All three of us stood at the window for oxygen, and we were all coughing uncontrollably. He then explained that we had been bombed. I heard sirens and chaos, the noise of the people running down the stairs. So our office was right at the top. The office block was being evacuated, but we couldn't even go out of the office. That's the experience of somebody. But
fortunately, no one was injured, right? But there was no one injured at the time, right?
Nobody was.
No. The struggle was, of course, very hard, and we know that also many were victimized during these years. The South Africa today, Sanna, if I may ask you, how would you say that it's sort of affected by these, well, this history? Can you see it today in the South African society, and can you also see still a polarization or a growing racist movement in the country?
To some extent, I would say yes, but I would not like to compare what's happening in South Africa to what's happening in Europe or the Western world in general. Like right-wing extremists, they exist, but I would say they're relatively low in numbers. They have the idea of that the white minority, they are oppressed by the black majority, and I think that it comes from some kind of fear of losing supremacy and power that the white minority still have in many aspects in South Africa today. But what's a bigger challenge, I would say, in South Africa today is the rise of a radical far-left party, which is called the Economic Freedom Fighters, EFF. And even if South Africa abolished the apartheid system, which was deeply rooted in the legal system, many of those structures are still there in society. And what concerns economic and social power, the white minority still has a lot of that power. And for example, what concerns the privately owned land, around 72% of that land is still owned by 9% of the population, the white minority. And on this topic, not much has changed the last 25 years. And the white people still have a lot of economic power in the society. And this is what the economic freedom fighters build their political idea on. And one of the main issues that they advocate for is the expropriation of this land from the white people without compensation. And this is a very, this can threaten the stability in the country because we can just see what happened in the neighboring country, Zimbabwe, when they implemented a similar reform and the total chaos that it has affected. And the EFF, they are now the third largest party in South Africa with 11% in the parliament. And their way of speaking and campaigning creates a lot of polarization in the country, I would say. And they also attract a lot of young people. Because a lot of the young people, my own generation that was born after '94, they don't see the developments in the country. They're tired of nothing happening, that the youth unemployment is still a very big issue. So they think that maybe EFF could create this real change they are waiting for and hoping for. So this is a very big challenge, and what the other political parties have to do is to find better solutions on these challenges.
The road towards democracy was not without bumps, of course, and not also the structure or the creation of a solid democratic system with less of inequality and more of social justice is still under its way, of course, in South Africa, and we are many that are still remains well engaged and active in this struggle, the remaining struggle. May I ask you, Lindiwe, what today's world is, of course, different in many ways, more interconnected, and at the same time it seems that popular solidarity movements like the one we had for South Africa at this time that we're talking about is not as common anymore. Why is this? I'd like to pose this question to all of you, but Lindiwe, maybe you can start. How can we learn from well, the work that you did? Tomas said that you were also a contributing part to here in Sweden to get this engagement going. What can we learn from the work that you did to also evoke more of solidarity movements in today's world?
Well, I think our work was based on the philosophy of justice and equality. We believe strongly in that. And that's what the Thomases were also endorsing, that we had a moral compass that was guiding our operations. And the ANC had a freedom charter, which is what guided our operations. We said South Africa belongs to those who live in it, all who live in it, black and white, and that no government can justly claim authority unless it's based on the will of the people. Now we have a government that's based on the will of the people. But of course, 400 years of oppression cannot be solved. The problems that came in 400 years can't be solved in 2 decades. This is what the reality is. That of course, there will be contestation, the different parties, but we still have the guidelines of what is just and what is right for the people of South Africa. That's what I think the world has to realize, that we need to be, instead, what happened is that many countries withdrew their support to South Africa because they thought, well, they are free now. But it's when we need more support now, because the schools in rural South Africa are in serious trouble. So serious, some don't even have toilets. And all of this cannot be solved by a new government overnight or in 2 decades. But we need some more solidarity. That's what I wanted to appeal to, because without the assistance of the outside world, it will take us much, much longer to solve the problems we have. Yes, there is violence in South Africa, but the violence is because we had a violent system and everybody was a victim of the system. The whites themselves, even though they were beneficiaries of apartheid, were violated. They couldn't be proper human beings. Africans had pent-up feelings over the years, seeing your children die out of school. The poverty that is all over South Africa is something that we shall need to address seriously if we're going to have an end to the suffering of the people.
Tomas, what is your advice or lessons learned? What do you think that we can learn from this engagement and bring into the evoking of a new solidarity movement?
Well, we live in very different times, you know. I think about internet and so on, and doing solidarity gala concerts like this, it doesn't happen that often anymore. I think in many ways it's a big problem because I have personally a feeling that people can get very involved in different issues, but for a very short time. You know, the time span is not that long. So what can you learn? I mean, I spoke to Mikael V half a year ago, and we speak once in a while about this issue, that we would like to see a younger generation of artists get involved in politics on this kind of level, you know, but it doesn't happen. That not in that way that it did back in '85, because it was it was huge. People were really getting involved, and it was possible to have this one question on the agenda for a long time. So it became. It really added up to big changes. Now things are moving really fast, so I don't know what to say, actually.
Maybe persistence is one thing that must be, well, realize that you need to sort of hang in there and not abandon,
yeah.
You know, a struggle takes time.
Really
it takes time.
Passionate people. You need passion. That's what you need. You need people like Lindiwe, who came to Scandinavia and lobbied for this, didn't give up, you know. She was persistent. So I think it's still possible. Of course it is. Of course it is, you know. But I think a very important ingredient is passion for the cause, you know.
We need passion, we need maybe persistence. I think also, Tomas, you mentioned that there are so many things. We know so much about the world now, and there are so many struggles ongoing maybe at the same time that it's hard to sort of gather this for just one cause. What would you say, Sanna? How can we evoke more of solidarity, and what can we bring with us for people's engagement?
I think the crucial point is to make it simple. I mean, we need to guide people how to engage and how to show solidarity, because I think the solidarity is there. I mean, we have seen current examples of the Black Lives Matter, of the Fridays for the Future, and we see how young people engage when they know how to do it. So I think that that's the crucial point. We need to make it simple and support people in doing that.
Lindiwe, you mentioned earlier the Freedom Charter, which still is an extremely powerful document. I actually the other day met one of the opposition leaders in Belarus, and I sent her a photo. I have the Freedom Charter on my wall in my office, so I sent her a photo of the Freedom Charter, because I think that this is also something that liberation movements of today really can learn from the work that you did in South Africa, a clear and very well political but specific document that you can sort of gather a broad movement behind. I think that with the passion and also the clear objective is also something that is very much needed. So with this, our time is coming to an end. I would like to thank you all so much, and of course also working in the name of Olof Palme, as both Sanna and I are doing, is quite powerful still, not the least when you come to a country like South Africa. And he himself was also, of course, speaking at the gala in 1985, and I know that you've had also a close relation, Lindiwe, to him, and of course also Oliver Tambo. So with this, thank you both so much, and we will, of course, continue the struggle for a free and democratic South Africa, and our solidarity is not diminishing. We still keep up the good work. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Anna, for arranging this.
Thank you.